what happened, man? How did this genie get put back in the bottle?
I think a lot of it, Rich, was just the realization from Kevin Durant and the Nets, really, that there was not going to be a trade at the end of the day. That was going to happen, and so at that point, Kevin Durant was going to be faced with a decision coming up because training camp is just a month away, and if there's no deal, Kevin Durant's going to be faced with the decision: do I show up in a disgruntled state of mind, kind of pull a Jimmy Butler, James Harden that we've seen over the last 2-3 years? Or is it going to be one of those things where you have a holdout situation, the likes of Ben Simmons just a year ago? And I don't think Kevin, this saga has already gotten ugly as it is. I mean, it's already gotten personal in terms of the trade request itself was personal. And then the ultimatum that was given to Joe Tsai a few weeks ago was personal. And just going down that path, clearly it just wasn't going to be something that either side wanted to stomach. And so it was really just a realization and the eye-opening experience that a deal wasn't going to happen. The best offer, I'm told, that the Nets had on the table was from the Celtics, Jaylen Brown, Derek White, and a first-round pick. And the price tag that the Nets had put forth on Kevin Durant, and you could say that they might have been even asking for something that they know was never going to be attainable anyway, right? But at the end of the day, when you have a guy that's a 12-time All-Star, 2-time Finals MVP, going to go down in the Hall of Fame, one of the top 15, 12, 20 best players ever, you have a high asking price, and that price was never going to be met. And I think both sides understood that this is the best opportunity to win a championship. And Rich, I thought once the season ended, once the Nets were swept on April 23rd, that's when this meeting should have taken place, because there were a lot of grievances, there were a lot of feelings on both ends that needed to be aired out. And better late than never. But this should have been done months ago. It finally happens now, and I think they both sides came to the realization that we need each other, and at this point, there's going to be pressure when you go into this next season, but they needed to move past this because the deal just was not going to happen.
So the other date in question, Shams, is June 30th. That's the date that the trade demand by Durant became public, and it was just a couple of days after Kyrie opted back in, and so many people started drawing a connected line between those two dots. And then we learn that that Durant wants the general manager and coach out as a condition of his staying and rescinding his trade demand. So you used the word disgruntled moments ago. What exactly was Durant, or is he still disgruntled about?
I think just when you look at how this summer has played out, they were swept in the playoffs in round one. That series did not end. That season did not end how everyone expected. And I think a level of accountability we saw. Sean Marks, the press conference that he had in mid-May, and a lot of the tone of the press conference was about accountability, about resetting the culture, about how the culture might have, worsened or might not be what it was a few years ago. Well, the only thing that really changed in the last few years was the arrival of Kevin Durant and Kyrie Irving. So I don't know how those two guys took it, but that, was something that did occur. And then I think you have to look at the Kyrie Irving, extension negotiations, and the fact that both sides were not able to get a deal done. Kevin Durant has vocally supported, privately supported Kyrie Irving over the last 6 to 8 months, while I think a lot of people have come down on Kyrie Irving. And so I think you cobble those two things, in this situation. Adam Harrington, an assistant on the Nets staff who was very close with Kevin Durant, a guy that's known throughout the league as a Durant confidant, he was fired at the end of the season. And so you take all those things into account, and just a lack of communication that existed between both sides. And again, that's something on both sides, right? That's something on the player side. That's something on the team side. Because at the end of the day, the only way you're going to get resolutions, the only way you're going to get past moments in life that are tough is through conversation and through a real relationship and through an open forum. And it took these guys, Rich, 2 months to get in the same room in a meeting together. Well, actually more than that. It's May, June, July, August, 4 months to get in the same room. And 2 months since the trade request. So that tells you everything you need to know about where this gulf existed.
Shams Charania here on the Rich Eisen Show, the athletic and stadium senior NBA insider. Look, I mean, I'm sure you've been involved in negotiations in your career, doing what you do. I have as well. Anytime you agree to something based on the fact that management doesn't give you what you want and presents the reality as a fait accompli, it doesn't really sit in well with the person who accepts the fait accompli, and that's Durant. The fait accompli is that we're not getting the value that we place on you. You should take that as a compliment, although that prevents you from getting the exit visa you want. And you don't want to hold out. We don't want you to hold out. So let's just go back together again and let bygones be bygones. Is that really the way it's going to be? Is that the way they're entering the season, with this still bubbling beneath the surface? Or was this conversation in Los Angeles airing things out and they really have come to an agreement and it's all hunky-dory? What do you got for me?
Rich, I think it's a little bit of both, and that's why these things are complex. It's not just a black and white situation. Right. I think this is very, very complex. It could be both things. Now, in a perfect world, in a perfect life, I think Kevin Durant clearly would have loved to get traded, and I think the Nets, in a perfect world, they wouldn't have had the restrictions of the rookie designated extension rule that didn't allow them to get a guy like Bam Adebayo or Donovan Mitchell on the roster because they had Ben Simmons on the team. And in a perfect world, the Nets would have gotten teams gutting their roster and giving every last asset like Joe Tsai and Sean Marks had wanted in any type of a Kevin Durant trade. So that's in a perfect world. But we, as we know, Rich, the world and life just isn't perfect, especially for a guy like Kevin Durant. He's got 4 years left on his deal. So a trade like this, if this was going to go down during training camp, before training camp, during the season, it was going to get uglier than what it already was. And that might be tough for the listeners to believe and tough for people to believe, but that's just business. And in the NBA, if a guy wants to trade, it's going to get ugly. If a guy on a 4-year deal wants to trade, we saw what happened with Ben Simmons. We saw the saga that took place. And I think both sides, at the end of the day, Kevin Durant, 33, going on 34, the legacy at the end of the day that he's built, the stature that he's built in this league, he's going to go down as a top 10 to 20 player of all time. Do you want to put yourself in a position where you're holding out of games? And clearly he did not want to go down that route. And clearly the Nets didn't want him to go down that route.
Right.
So, and on the same token, I do think this opportunity, from everything I've been told, they left that meeting energized and ready for next season. I don't think this meeting was Kevin Durant left and he's like, man, I still want to get traded. Like, what the hell? I don't think that's the tenor. I know that's not how the tenor of that conversation ended.